Okay, welcome to this writing lesson where we'll be looking at a part one of the writing. Remember, there's two parts in the writing, and part one is usually writing about a graph or a table, some sort of data. And I understand that some of you must be quite frustrated if you're trying to get into a university, for example, an art class or an art course, sorry, at university, and you're forced to talk or write about graphs, which is not your strong point. I completely understand how frustrating that is. It's not my strong point either. I am a graphic designer initially before I became a linguist. So I do understand the problem. However, this is what has worked for checking your ability to express yourself in the academic IELTS. So unless you are a general training student, and there are some universities and some university courses that accept IELTS general training as your level of English, then this would not apply to you because you would be doing a letter in your part one. Part two, both of them do essays, but this is an academic writing, so we're looking most probably it's going to be a graph that comes up in your IELTS. There are also possibilities of writing about a process, the manufacture of something, and occasionally you will get a map as well. You might get a map where you have to describe the changes between map A and map B, for example. But I would say about 80% of the time you have to describe a graph. As you can see here, this is book 16, test number 1, and this is what's given to you in the task number 1 of the writing. Now, usually I would spend 20 minutes on this. If it was a real exam, I would not spend more than 20 minutes on part 1 because I need 40 minutes for part 2. Remember, part 1, as it says over here, you'll see that you have to write 150 words. Part 2, you have to write 250 words. So if you work it out, it's about 20 minutes for the first one and 40 minutes for the second one, because the entire writing task the entire writing exam is 1 hour. Okay. We are going to spend obviously a lot longer than 20 minutes on this because I'll be looking at the techniques of how to deal with this task, and I will also be looking at new vocabulary and new grammar, or not new grammar, but focusing on grammar that you should know but just maybe are not exactly clear how to use. So we'll be taking a lot longer than 20 minutes, but obviously in the real exam you have to reduce, you have to be quick in task 1 because it's also worth less than task 2. The number of points or marks you're going to get for part 1 will be lower. Okay, so the first thing, when I first look at a task 1 of the writing, I'm going to look at the image because, or the graph in this case, because that's what's giving us a lot of information. Yes, of course, you will be looking at that as well, but because our minds, our human brains, are visual, we are not naturally reading. We don't come out of our, give our mother giving birth to us. My goodness, I don't want to say it. What's wrong with me? Okay, so I don't come out of the birth canal technically and suddenly am able to read. However, I am able very quickly from a very young age to process images. Okay, and that's why whenever we're doing the IELTS, whether it's listening or reading, speaking not so much, but writing as well, we're looking at images first to give us as much information as we can to get our brains ready for what we're going to say. So I'm looking at a graph very generally here, 2 graphs. One of them, the graph is generally going up, all of the lines are going up, and in the second graph the line is going down. Okay, now I might want to look, what is going on there? Okay, so it's percentage of households, all right, doing what? Well, they are using electrical appliances between these dates, between 1920 and 2019, so 99 years. Okay, and what do the different lines represent? Well, if we look at the black one with the black dots, that's the washing machine. The gray one is the refrigerator. Let's make that a bit smaller. So washing machine, refrigerator, and then obviously the dashed line is the vacuum cleaner. You should know what those things are. In the second graph, we can see that it's the number of hours that somebody. Usually, unfortunately, it would have been, certainly prior to 1960s, it would have been the woman in the house. So the number of hours that people in the household spend doing housework. Now look out for these little dots, these asterisks, that's the technical name, the little stars, because that will tell us more information. So that means the housework, what is it defined by housework, is washing clothes, preparing meals, and then cleaning in general. Washing up, washing, tidying up, things like that. Okay, so now we've got a general idea of what we're going to be looking at, and we're just going to double check exactly by looking up at the table at the top here. So, okay. So in this table here, it says the charts below show the changes in ownership of electrical appliances and the amount of time spent doing housework in households in one country, doesn't say where, between 1920 and 2019. So those 99 years. Okay, so nothing, we didn't gain much more information. We know it changes because that's the graph. A graph represents changes anyway. Tables as well, they represent change over time in this case. So we've learned nothing more, and we have to talk about this country. The way we speak about it, we can't say a specific country, we can say this country. Okay, and what do you have to do? This is always the case. So if you've done enough of these practice tests, you will not really need to focus on the second sentence, but let's do it now. So you have to summarize the information. Okay, very clear and a very important word here. What does it mean to summarize? That means I do not mention everything. And what do they actually explain what they mean by summarize here? By selecting and reporting the main features. Okay, so I do not give exact numbers for this little random one here. Let's just take this one as an example. So in the year 2000, for the washing machine, there's it's not a straight line, there's a slight increase. If it went from this dot to that dot, it would look like actually maybe it's exactly. Maybe it is exact. Anyway, the fact remains that it's such an insignificant thing to talk about that I'm not going to be saying anything like, in the year 2000, the washing machine was found in 70% of households. I wouldn't say it because it's just totally unacceptable. Not acceptable, unnecessary. Okay, because you are summarizing the information, you are reporting the main features, and you are making comparisons where relevant. Where relevant, that means only when it's important. So do not just put comparisons everywhere. So this, for example, the dotted line, the vacuum cleaner and the refrigerator are both going up, and they keep going up the whole time. However, there is something, I wouldn't compare those two. I wouldn't compare number 1 and number 2 here because they both tend to be going up. But I would compare the fact that the washing machine dipped in the 1980s. For some reason, it dipped down. So I would compare that to the other two. That's worth saying. Okay. Now, what do I then... What's the first step? Once I've analyzed what's up in this box or this table up here, and I've looked at the data, what would be the first thing that I'm going to be doing? Okay. Here's your blank piece of paper. Okay. And what I would do before I start writing here is just focusing on the overall picture. Okay. And with the overall picture, I'm talking about looking at the graph as if you're 10 meters away and your eyesight isn't very good, and you can see a very general haze of this. So I'm just making keywords here, key notes. I'm not writing anything yet because I don't want to rush into this yet. I just want to make the key focus on the key features. Okay. Sorry, there must be a problem there. I just want to write K. No, I can't. Okay, so we'll do it here. Key features. Okay, so the key features, always, it's all going up, all goes up in the end. Yes, there is a dip here, but that's not a main feature. That's something I'm going to mention later on. So all goes up in graph number 1. The steepest rise is the fridge. So from 1920. So the fridge, 1920 is almost 0. Maybe let's say 1 or 2%. Very, very small. And it just rises steeply. Okay. By the 1980s, it's 100%. Every single person, or every single household, let's say, in this country has a fridge, and it never goes down. So the fridge is a very steep rise. The vacuum cleaner and the washing machine. Well, let's not focus on that. Let's look at, okay, so this is, sorry, let's separate it like this. So this is graph number 1, and in graph number 2, it's a fall, steep at first, steep, then shallow. A shallow, would it be shallow? Yeah, a shallow, or let's use a better word, gentle. A gentle fall towards the end of it. We can see that's talking about the year 2000 until where this graph ends, 2019. Okay, so it all goes up. The fridge especially goes up a lot, and the washing machine never reaches 100%, and dips in the 1980s. So this is where we're putting in the extra stuff in brackets. Okay, so it's not, it is a feature, but it's not a key feature. So dips 1980s or 1980, and maybe we could compare the fact that the vacuum cleaner managed to get to 100%. So vacuum 100% in the year 2000. So it was a whole 20 years later. 20 years later. Okay. All right. Now that we have just forced ourselves to write down the key words, now we're ready to write about it. And we make it very clear in our writing. So obviously in the exam, I would do that. You just need to do one big long line. That means don't recognize this as my writing. This is my working page. You will get a working page in the exam, and then a specific page for writing on. But the examiner is not going to penalize you if you end up getting flustered and a mistake. Oh my goodness, I should have written the other way around. I should have used that as a working page. Don't worry. If you do end up using the wrong page for the working, you can ask for a new piece of paper from the examiner, or just cross out what you don't need. Okay. All right. So this is where we would start here. Now, how do I start? Okay, I have to take this information, which appears in the first sentence of the text in the box, but I cannot use the same wording. So what can I do? Well, they've used the word charts, so I would use the word graphs. So the graphs, the provided, let's use this. Now I've made it into, I've added an adjective, the provided graphs, and then this is the word show. We don't need to change that word. That's the most common way to say it. Demonstrate? No. I think we're just going to keep that word. And now it says the changes. and the changes is a noun. So what can I do? I can make it into a verb. How? So I can show how the ownership, how it can show how many electrical appliances so the provided graphs show how many electrical appliances were used. So owner, to own something, I'm a user of it. Were owned, let's even use that word. And now we've said in a country, in a certain country, okay, as well as it's time spent doing housework, how much time was spent, how much as well as, let's just finish this, as well as how much time, yes, as well as how much time, sorry, people spent. Now I've added, I'm not just using time spent, I've added people spent. How much time people spent doing housework, I can just use on housework. Okay, that has the same meaning. Spent on housework between 1920 and 2019. Okay, first paragraph. We need a space, which is useful that they've given us one here already. And that has already given you a few points just by showing the examiner that you are able to use paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is where you change the wording, change the grammar. Okay, so the provided graphs show how many electrical appliances were owned in a certain country, as well as how much time people spent on housework between 1920 and 1920 and 2019. Fine, done. Now, the next step is talking about the data in the graph, and that's obviously where you're going to get your most points. This is maybe a few points just by doing this, but obviously we need to go much further. Now, the best way I explain this to students is that I should be able to, with my text only, with my data only, I should be able to bring that text to a person who's never seen these graphs before, and they are able to generally, very generally, recreate the graphs based on what I've written. Okay, and that's what we're going to try and do this time. Okay, so let's start with talking about the first graph here. And very general, very a big overview of this. So in terms of, let's start with, we're going to be focusing on graph number one. So in terms of what's graph number one showing? It's showing the percentage of households. So in terms of, this means I'm talking about, I'm focusing on this thing I'm going to say, in terms of the percentage of households that had a washing machine, refrigerator, and vacuum cleaner. sorry, single C double M. Now I need a comma. So in terms of this, the percentage of these things, all of the appliances saw, this is very common to see, they saw, how do I explain this? We're going to put this one up here. I'll do a little something from the dictionary, how we use see in this way. Okay, it's up here. All of the appliances saw an increase over how many of these? How many years? Over the 99 years. Oops, yes. In terms of the percentage of households that had a washing machine, refrigerator, and vacuum cleaner, all of the appliances saw an increase over the 99 years. The 99 year period. Let's just take away the S. Period. No, hang on. All the appliances saw an increase. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. The most we're going to look at something, the one that increased the most. The most we can extrapolate here. That's another word, extrapolate. So that means we can make predictions, or we can make, we can use the data to tell us that people really liked something. And if you look here carefully, they really liked the idea of a refrigerator. You can keep food for longer. You can go to the shop only once a week instead of every day, all these things. So we can extrapolate from this that the most sought after, to search for something, the past tense, or the verb 3 of search is seek. Sorry. A similar word, it's a synonym of search is seek. A little bit literary, that word, but sought after, something that's sought after, that means it's really wanted. So the most sought, which is the verb 3 of seek, after appliance, the most sought after appliance was now I don't need to say refrigerator again, because the short word for refrigerator is the fridge. So the most sought after appliance was the fridge, which in the 1920s, so I need a comma here, which in the 1920s, sorry, in 1920, let's just say specifically, so which in 1920 was only found in, let's have a look at that. That looks like that's 5%, that's 3%. 3% of households. Okay. Which was only found in 3% of households. Yet, or however, yet, only how many years later? 1920 to 1980 is 60 years. So yet only 60 years later, it was found in, it was a feature of the home. Let's use it more, if you want to really show off, getting a 9, was only found in 3% of households, yet only 60 years later, another comma after yet, only 60 years later, it was a feature. I'm not going to say 100%. I'm going to use every. Spell it properly. Feature of every single home. Okay, household is another way for home. Okay, so let's read it again and just double check. In terms of the percentage of households that had a washing machine, refrigerator, and vacuum cleaner, all of the appliances saw an increase over the 99-year period. Technically, I should put a dash there because period is a noun, and the adjective, the single adjective in this case, is 99-year, but there's two words, so I have to join them together and put a little dash in between. The most sought after appliance was the fridge, which in 1920 was only found in 3% of households, yet only 60 years later it was a feature of every single home. Feature means it featured. That is another way to say it existed. Okay. Now we're going to use the word respectively. We're going to see if we can use that. The washing machine and the vacuum cleaner and the vacuum cleaner increased okay, we need to use percentage of households. Let's just think about this. The washing machine and the vacuum was found in, so washing machine is the first one we're talking about, so 40%. That's for the first thing. So I've mentioned washing machine, so I need to put the number. If I'm going to use this word respectively, I need to use washing machine first and then this number first. So the washing machine and the vacuum cleaner was found in 40% and 30% of homes respectively. Of homes, sorry, I forgot to put the word, take this out, in the 1920s, in 1920, sorry, in 1920, respectively. Okay, and this word respectively, I'll add up here, respectively. You can see how it's used. By the, oops, let's see, don't know why I write that, by the year 2000, we're talking about the, oh yeah, by the year 2000, the vacuum cleaner okay, I don't need to say cleaner again because the vacuum, it's a technically correct English, the vacuum let's see, 100% of households or homes had a vacuum. In contrast, this is a semicolon. It's technically, I can start a new sentence here, but I feel like I need to join them. So I'm going to use a semicolon here. In contrast, comma, In contrast, only between it's about 69, I would say, and that's around 69 up there, and this is around 74, so around 70%. In contrast, I forgot to put an extra zero in there, that's naughty. By the year 2000, 100% of households had a vacuum. In contrast, only around 72%, halfway between those two, only around 72% had a washing machine. In the early, what am I going to say here? I want to talk about everything from 2000 to 2019. So in the early 21st, not 20th, 20th is the 1900s, 21st century. Okay. And in contrast, only around 70% had a washing machine in the early 21st century. It's worth putting here with a dip. Only the washing machine. While we're still talking about the washing machine, I think it's worth mentioning this unusual dip here. What happened in the 1980s in this country that suddenly people started getting rid of washing machines? Maybe it became much cheaper to use a laundromat, which is the place where you can go in the city center or in the village center, not center, but in the sort of the center of the suburb. There's sometimes a laundromat, especially in Europe. You can go in there and wash. So maybe there's a whole bunch of laundromats that opened up, and it was actually cheaper to go and wash your clothes at the laundromat and sell your washing machine. It's possible. Who knows? Okay, so had a washing machine in the early 21st century with a dip, and it was an unusual dip because it's the only time it didn't. With a unusual, no, with a trend breaking. It broke the trend. The trend is going like this for the others. Pretty much all of them are going like this, and then it broke the trend just briefly. So I'm going to use a trend breaking dip. Trend, by the way, if you want to know what a trend is, I'm going to add that here just so it might be a new word for you. And I'm going to make this into an adjective, so I need to have join it together with a dash. So with a trend breaking dip in 1980. Okay. Move this up a bit. I can find my mouse. Need to mention this final graph, obviously. Steeply, what did we write at the top here? Fell steeply and then gentle. Yeah. Okay. In terms of, I'm going to use that again because we've got it at the top. In terms of the time spent working on household chores. Now there's a new word for you, so we'll add that up there. Household chores. There was a steep decline between 1920 and we can extrapolate here. So let's say and between 1920 and 1960 with, oh, sorry, not which, with a leveling off. Now this has become a noun. A leveling off. Nouns, when they look like this, it's very uncommon actually. This is not a particularly common way of writing, but it's perfectly acceptable English. A leveling off needs to have a dash between it, or technically it's called a hyphen. So a dash is a thing that is long and there's two spaces in between. So it says, for example, I could use a dash here. If I change the color of my pen quickly, where's my... I could have used a dash here. Here it is. No, give me the color. Could have used a dash there as well, and a dash looks like just like that. And then there's some space on either side, and it means I'm still connected to the previous sentence. Okay, but I'm using a hyphen here, Hyphen, and this hyphen joins things together like adjectives, but in this case, to level off, I've made it into a noun, a leveling off. With a leveling off over the following, how many years have we got there? So we've got 1960, so that's 40 years plus, yeah, so the following 59 years. And we'll give the numbers there from 20 hours per week, 20 hours per week to 12. Okay. I'm just going to add here, and I'm going to use a different color just because it's easier for those people who are, you know, you're trying to follow this on a computer screen on YouTube. But obviously in the real exam, I would use my same color here, and I would add the numbers, which I didn't do, which I've done here. So 50, yeah, 50 hours per week to, and then we've got 20, right? 20 in brackets. I'm allowed to use brackets. No problem to use brackets. Okay. Overall, it can be seen. And now I'm going to see the correlation between, there's always a correlation between graph A and graph B. And that is it's asking you to summarize the information, but it's also asking you to make a comparison, right? And whoops, that's gone away for some reason. And the comparison must be made not just within the graphs, each individual graph itself, but with the two graphs themselves. So it can be seen that, and what is the correlation? And maybe correlation is a new word for you, so I'll put it up here. What is the correlation? Well, we can see the more electrical appliances there are in the house, the fewer hours you have to work on household chores. Overall, it can be seen that the more electrical appliances each household had or contained, or let's use used, the fewer hours. Now, who? The people in the house? Good. What's the word for that? The occupants. The fewer hours, the occupants. Obviously, I said in the 1950s it was usually the woman, but in the year 2023, that should not be the case. Everyone should be helping out the fewer hours the occupants hours needed to do. Yeah, so the fewer hours the occupants needed to the fewer hours the occupants needed, okay, not need to, don't get confused, this is a separate thing, there's no comma here though, but the fewer hours that they needed to do something, the fewer hours the occupants needed to do housework, do the housework. It's enough because we've spent enough time. Whoops, do the housework. Let's do a final check. If we were running out of time, I wouldn't, obviously, because part 2 is where the money is. Well, how do I say that? It's got where all the marks are, but it's still worth spending some time if I've got. So the provided graphs show how many electrical appliances were owned in a certain country, as well as how much. I think I need to add here between. Oh yeah, there we go. As well as how much time people spent on housework between 1920. Yeah, that's fine, because that also refers these dates also refer back to the previous thing. In terms of the percentage of households that had a washing machine, refrigerator, and vacuum cleaner, all of the appliances saw an increase over the 99-year period. The most sought-after appliance was the fridge, which in 1920 was only found in 3% of households, yet only 60 years later it was a feature of every single home. The washing machine and the vacuum cleaner was found in 40 and 30% of homes in 1920 respectively. By the year 2000, 100% of households had a vacuum cleaner. In contrast, only around 72% had a washing machine in the early 21st century, with a trend-breaking dip in 1980. Do I need to say exactly what happened? No, I'm just saying there was an unusual thing that happened there. I don't need to say the number, because it's a minor thing, but it's a little blip and unusual. Final paragraph. In terms of the time spent working on household chores, there was a steep decline between 1920 and 1960, 50 hours per week to 20, with a leveling off over the following 59 years from 20 hours per week to 12. Overall, it can be seen, this is a new paragraph, overall, it can be seen the more electrical appliances each household used, the fewer hours the occupants needed to do the housework. Okay, now let's see how much beyond how many more words I wrote than I should have, because this might affect you, and I have a feeling that I've gone too far on this, but let's double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Actually, let's find the quickest way is to find an average. So I would say this one here looks like the most average. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so let's say an average of 7 words per line, and it's worth you knowing your average of this type of text. So we should have 20 lines to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's not count that one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Now look how many more I've got here. 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. Okay, I'm within the range that's allowed, although I am a little bit beyond what I need, and bear this in mind, that sometimes it's worth cutting out some bits of information. So for example, this one here, that a trend-breaking dip, perhaps not absolutely necessary, but I still think it's important. So it is tricky to comply with the idea that a person who's never seen these graphs before should be able to look at my text and recreate the graphs pretty accurately. That's very hard to do in 150 words, but they're doing that on purpose to force you to really think about how to summarize down this information. So we're in around the 200 word mark here, which is pushing it. I mean, I wouldn't recommend, but the examiner should look at this and go, okay, this guy really knows what he's doing. He's managed to do it in 20 minutes. And you know, it's not ideal. Let me just say this. This is not a good example because I've gone probably about 20 words or 30 words more than I feel comfortable doing. And I could remove that, the overall paragraph, but I really like the idea of having a final overall paragraph, and especially one that highlights what is the correlation between the two graphs, or the three graphs. You might get three. Okay, anyway, that's it for this. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments of this video, and I will see you in the next video for a writing task number 2 sometime this week. Thanks very much.